If you want to change your life, change your story. Everything that's ever happened to you, you created a story. Whether it was good or bad or indifferent. I don't care if it was horrendous or it was off the top high. We all create a story about everything that happens to us. And you're the creator of your own story. So I would encourage you to create a masterpiece.
You are listening to Personal Development Mastery Podcast, helping you take the simple actions to master personal development and create a life you yearn for. I am your host, Agi Keramidas, and my mission is simple, to inspire you to take action towards a purposeful and fulfilling life. In this podcast, I invite myself inside the minds of remarkable entrepreneurs, authors, thought leaders, spiritual teachers. So, if you're ready to find practical insights that you can implement right now, make sure you follow the podcast and get the episodes as soon as they are released. Today I'm delighted to speak with Dave Albin. Dave, you are the #1 Firewalk Instructor in America, and you have worked with Tony Robbins for almost 20 years as his Firewalk captain. Your success had a scary and violent path, though. You had a challenging childhood with adoption, drinking, and hard drugs from your early teenage years, reaching a point in 1988 where you put a gun to your head. You have firewalked hundreds of thousands of people, and you and Tony Robbins set a world record in London in 2005, walking over 12,000 people. Dave, welcome to the show. It's such a pleasure to speak with you.
Thanks, Agi. I'm really, really stoked to be here. It's really cool.
You know, the topic of Firewalk, and we were just having a chat before we started recording, because of my own personal experience with being at Tony Robbins' event and doing the Firewalk myself twice. It was something that I find very intriguing, and I would like to speak a bit later on about what transformational power Firewalk has over someone and some things like that. Before we go there, I would like to ask you a little bit of your background, and especially, I shared a little snippet of your story. I would like to ask you to take us back to that really major incident in your life when you went from wanting to commit suicide to really changing and then discovering personal development and so on. So
how it kind of all started is, I was born to a single mom and in Hollywood, California, and she was a server in a hotel in Hollywood, the Fremont Hotel, very famous. And the bottom line is that she had two other sons, both of which were my stepbrothers. And she couldn't afford me. So by the time I was 5 years old, what she did, she put me up for adoption to her sister, who would have been my aunt and uncle. So Bob and Pat Albin raised me. And by the time I was 11 years old, they decided that was going to be the first day of summer in 1964. They decided to tell me that I was adopted and that they weren't my parents. And so that kind of, when you're a young kid, right? I'm 9 years old, something like that. It was like, what are you telling me? Of course you're my parents, right? So it was very confusing. Well, shortly after that, where this starts to take a turn was they both started drinking. Now, I don't know if they started drinking because of the pressure of them having to tell me or whatever. There was a lot going on in America at the time with the Bay of Pigs and, the missiles with Russia and America were going at it during the Kennedy era. But my dad was a military officer, the man that raised me. And so he was under a lot of stress and a lot of pressure. And bottom line, he started drinking. And so I followed them, right? I saw them drink. I decided I saw my parents, these two wonderful people, turn into these just crazy humans when they started drinking. So I was curious. So I started drinking, and that led to drugs. And before I was, much of even of a teenager, I was already into hard drugs. Well, to bring that forward, on June 8th of 1988, all of that caught up with me. And I was in so much pain, IG. It was just like, there was emotional pain. It was excruciating. There was physical pain. That was hard. And that particular day, I said, I'm done. That's it. This is over. I'm not doing this anymore. So the quick out for me, I knew if I put a bullet in my head, I knew the pain would stop immediately. And so once you get to that threshold, it's really hard not to put a bullet in your head. Because again, I'm dealing with alcohol and heroin and cocaine and other drugs. And so it's excruciating is the only real word. Well, in a last minute part of compassion, if you will, I was married to a woman at the time that had 3 kids. They were my 3 stepkids. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking, you know what, if you pull this trigger, they're going to see that. They're going to have to live with that. And that's wrong. And you cannot do that to them. And that's what turned my head. And the next thing I know, I called an organization here in America called Alcoholics Anonymous. I know it's global. I know it's in Europe as well. And I went to a meeting on June 8th, 88. I went to 4 meetings that day, actually. I went to a 12:30, a 4:30, 6:30, and 8:30. And guess what? It worked. It stuck. I had 1 day of sobriety, went to it 2, 3, a week, a month. And when I got to a month, they gave me a chip. And it said 1 month. Then I got one at 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. And then I got the 1-year chip, right? It's called the blue chip that we're also proud of, if you will. And that was, this year, I will have 35 years. And so, here's my chip. This one here says 34 years, and it has the Lord's Prayer, the Serenity Prayer on the back. And it says, to thy own self, be true, and recovery. So it has a lot of messages on it that remind us every day that our struggle is one day at a time. So what happened from there was I got introduced to the personal development industry. And the reason I did that is because I had insomnia. When you're coming off drugs and alcohol, it's pretty rough, I'm going to tell you. It was horrible because every day is a struggle. You want to drink or use drugs every day, every single day. And I did that for almost 3 years, wanting to use something to help, go back to that horrible lifestyle, every day. So anyway, I'm up late one night and there he is. Tony Robbins in the infomercial days back in the 80s, young Tony Robbins, all enthusiastic. And he was selling a program called Personal Power. It's a 30-day program. And I jokingly say, AG, it came on little cassette tapes, IG, that
cassette tapes,
little white thing, yeah, right, cassette tapes. I jokingly tell my audience, if you want to know what they are, Google it or go to the Smithsonian Institution. You can see them there. And so they sent me the program. I opened it, I went through it, and I did exactly what Tony taught me to do. And guess what? It worked. And so that was like an opening for me to go. Not only was I using AA, the 12 steps, right? Because the 12 steps are in AA to help change your life. The 12 traditions support the group. So that's how AA works. Well, now I also had the personal development industry helping me to become, who I am today. Because, I learned a long time ago that I think the 2 most important times of your life is the moment you were born and the moment you figure out why. So that started to open my eyes up to why am I here? What's this about? Is there a greater purpose to my life? And the answer was absolutely. And so once I got with Tony's, involved with the personal development industry, I loaned that tape program. I also read his book, Unlimited Power. I loaned them both to a friend of mine in AA. Well, 7 years later in 1995, he calls me on the phone. He goes, Dave, Tony Robbins is coming to town. Dude, come on, let's go see him. And I went, yeah, well, when? And so we looked at our schedules, everything matched. And he goes, dude, I'm going to handle it. He goes, I'll take care of everything. I'll call you back. Once I said I'd go, he said, I'll take care of everything. So he calls me back like an hour later, IG, and he goes, hey, listen, man, everything's done. We pick up the tickets at will call, and here's what they told us to do. Number 1, drink a lot of water. Stay hydrated. Number 2, bring snacks because you're going to spend a lot of time in the room. Number 3, bring a good attitude. And number 4, be ready to play full out. And I said, Dan, how much was the ticket? He said, $700. And I went, okay, well, don't worry. I'll play full out. And so, and just as he's getting ready to get off the phone, I said, all right, see you, Dan. He goes, oh, wait, I forgot to tell you something. He goes, we're going to be doing a firewalk. And you know what, IG, I didn't even know what that was. I didn't even know what it meant. And I remember thinking immediately, now I'm not saying anything to my buddy Dan on the phone. I'm just thinking, oh, no. Oh, that's a hard no for me. We are not doing that. Forget it. I mean, I still want to go. And I'm sure that's for the crazy people. I don't have to do it. So I was okay with that. Right. So here comes the event. And Dan and I get there, and Tony takes the stage at like 2:00 in the afternoon. Now, I know you know this because you attended, but as you know, 10 hours later, what does Tony do? He says, take your shoes off. And I'm like, and I'm struggling with that one, right? Because I'm not going to do the firewalk. So I'm like, well, so why am I going to take my shoes off? And then the thought I had was, yeah, but if you don't take your shoes off, 3,000 people that you're here with are going to know that you're wussing out. So I don't want them to think that. So I'll just take them off and I'll fake it, right? So when I get out there, right, and you know this, right, he gets you going out there, and now you're with how many thousand people? I know when you were in London, it was probably 10,000, 12,000, whatever.
It was 10,000.
But here in the States, it was 10,000. Yeah, okay. So back in 1995, we were in Reston, Virginia, just out of Washington, D.C. There was 3,000, right? But still, 3,000 people is a lot. And then what's he have you doing? He gets you to start chanting, right? You're clapping. Yes. Yes, yes. And you're walking out there with 1,000 people feeling the intensity of everybody clapping and saying yes. And then, as you know, when you get out there, he's got African drummers, right? So it's got dun, 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 dun. And so your whole body is just, you're in it, man. You know what I mean? You're in this groove. He's had you for 10 hours. He's prepped you. You're chanting. There's drummers. There's a giant fire built over there in the parking lot. I'm sure you saw it. And you know what they do with that, right? They start that fire early in the day. They let it burn all day, and then it burns all the way down, and it renders the coals. And then they load those coals in wheelbarrows, and then they bring a wheelbarrow into a section where there's 2 lanes of sod of grass. I think in Europe they call it turf on both sides. That's about 3 feet wide, and it's about 18 feet long. And then they take a flathead shovel, they just shovel those coals onto that grass, and that's what you walk on. Well, I hid out in the back because I'm not doing it. Well, that's a bad strategy. And it's bad because Tony's people know where all the cowards are, right? And Tony sends his people to go find you. He doesn't want you to not do this. He wants you to do it because it's going to change your life. So, sure enough, I'm back there. I'm hiding out. Here comes one of Tony's people, and he locks eyes with me. And I guess, IG, what happens is Tony must train those guys. Listen, when you make eye contact with them, don't take your eyes off him, because this guy wouldn't take his eyes off me. And all of a sudden, he gets to a certain proximity from me. He's probably 20 feet away from me, and he kind of looks at me like, you know, a strange look. He's like, "Are you okay?" And of course, when we're not okay, what do we say? I'm fine. I'm good, right? And I'm not. I'm out of my mind. I'm freaking out at the moment. And he goes, oh, he says, well, when I said I'm okay, he said, well, hey, let me ask you, are you going to walk tonight? And I said, I kind of leaned into him and I said, absolutely not. And he goes, oh, okay, that's not a problem. He goes, we don't want you to do anything you don't want to do. And I thought, okay, I like this guy. He's going to get me out of here. I don't have to do this. There it is. And then he asked me a question that changed my life. And to this day, I don't know who the guy was. I have no idea. None. Zero. He said to me, well, wouldn't you at least like to watch? And I thought for a second, I'm like, yeah, I would. I like to watch these people burn their feet off. This should be a real interesting evening. And right. And so he said, well, you're not going to be able to see anything from way back here. I'm 100 yards from where they're actually walking, right? So he said, well, listen, for you to be able to see it, you're going to have to get up there closer. So just get in line. And when you get up there, you'll actually be able to see it. Right? He kind of baited me. But in his defense, he was telling me the truth. I couldn't see anything from where I was situated at that moment. So I got in line and I'm kind of waiting there and I'm walking along and I can't see anything. And all of a sudden, this guy comes up to me and he says, he knows when you're ready. You're whispering this in my ear, right? He goes, he knows when you're ready. When he says go, you go. And I'm like, what? What? I'm like, you didn't get the memo, pal. I'm not doing this. I'm just watching. And I'm kind of moving in the line, right? And next thing I know, I look at an angle. I can't see in front of me, but I can see in an angle. And I'm now seeing people walk on fire for the first time. And my brain is going, what in the hell is going on here? What are they doing? What is this? This is insane, right? Because your brain, I got no reference for this. I know nothing, right? And I'm kind of watching it. Now I'm mesmerized. I'm just kind of like staring looking over here, and the next thing I know, in front of me, boom, I get to the front of the line. And now I'm there, right? And I'm looking down, and I'm, the coals are bright red, and the wheelbarrow's there, and I'm feeling the heat coming off, and I'm freaking out. And I'm staring into the abyss. Well, the trainer's standing there, all of a sudden he goes, "Eyes up." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, that's right. I was in a room for 10 hours with Tony Robbins, and what's he teach you to do? Keep your eyes up. Look to the future. Don't stare at what you fear. That's what paralyzes people. Don't do that. We're going to teach you how to not do that." So now my eyes are up, and the trainer goes, "Squeeze your fist and say yes." And I went, "Yes." And he went, "Stronger." And I went, "Yes." Right? And now he screams at me. He goes, "Stronger." Now, he screamed at me that final time because you could tell I wasn't all in. I wasn't fully engaged, right? And when he screamed at me to go stronger, I threw my hands in the air and I screamed at the top of my lungs, "Yes!" And he goes, "Go, go, go." And I took off. And so here's where the fun began, right? Because the first thing I learned about firewalking, and I'm sure you would agree, and that is when you take that first step, oh, you'll take the second, third, fourth, and fifth for sure, right? And so like you said, as you got involved, there's anchors at the end. There's two people that interlock arms to catch you. And they're like, "Stop, wipe your feet and celebrate." And I'm wiping my feet, I'm celebrating. And that girl reached me, the second anchor, and pulled me out of the way. "You did it, you did it." And so at that point, at the Firewalk, it's exhilarating, or at least it was for me. It was probably one of the most transformational moments of my life. I remember looking back and looking at the coals and going, "Dude, you just walked on fire and the coals were 1,000 degrees and you didn't burn yourself." And I did it. I was successful, but I didn't know how I did it. I just did it, right? So the question came to me immediately was, okay, if you can do that, what else can you do? How has fear stopped you in the past from living the life that you want and or deserve, right? So all this stuff was going through your head after that Firewalk, right? And again, I know you went through it, so you can relate, right? Well, here's where it got interesting for me, and tell me what you think. And that was the next day. So I come to the Firewalk the next day, right? Here we are, same 3,000 people the night before, but I never saw or witnessed anything like it in my life. These people were connected because of that Firewalk at a level humanistically that I'd never experienced. They were laughing and they were hugging and they were crying and they were telling each other story. And you know what I mean? They were just connected at a human level. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. This is freaking awesome. Again, it was just so wonderful to be in that staging area as we were getting ready to go into the room, right? Because we're coming back. It's a 4-day event. We do the Firewalk on day 1, and then day 2, the fun starts with Tony, as you know, right? And so to be there in that morning with that, it was just so magical for me, and that's what got me. Well, it's both, right? It was the night before and then the next day, and I was hooked. And that just led me to, wanting to know more, learn more, become part of Tony's organization. As you know, he uses, 300-400 volunteers for every event. I became part of the volunteer team, just like you. And then I became a subcontractor in 1996.
Can I pause you, Dave, for
Sure,
a moment? Before we drift to another direction, because your description, first of all, it really brought me back. I mean, I can remember what you said about the African drums and all this walking barefoot towards the, where the coals were, where we didn't know at that time what exactly would happen. All we knew that we were walking. Right. And it was that feeling like a trance. That's how I remember it being. We were walking. I didn't have so much fear. I had fear, but there was more excitement than fear. So I really went without the same hesitation. But thank you for bringing this experience back to my memory and how transformational it was. And I will add, because you mentioned the second anchor who was the person who would celebrate with you once you had completed those steps over the hot coals.
Yes.
So when I went
Yes.
to the second time as a crew member, as a volunteer, I was that person, the second anchor. So I think I had around 200 or 300 people. I don't know, I couldn't really count them after a point, that I
They're coming
hugged
at
and
you
I
fast,
jumped
man.
around with and said, yes, you've done it. I was that person that told you, did you realize what you've just done? So it was such an incredible feeling to see the energy of 200 or 300 people at that time. So I'm only saying that again because
100%.
I thank you. I appreciate you bringing me back and reliving that event.
Yeah.
There is one thing in particular I think that I wanted to ask you about, the firewalk. I think you touched upon it in terms of overcoming a fear and seeing what else you can overcome. But I would like your thoughts on it, because you have done so many thousands of firewalks with people. What is it? Why is it the most transformative experience? So much that Tony Robbins chose to put firewalking instead of. I'm sure he could have done something else for one to overcome their fears, but he did this. So, would you like to explain that to me? What is so unique about the firewalk itself as an experience that leads you to the other side, really empowered and transformed?
Yeah. Well, that's such a great empowering question, because a lot of people don't realize that, a lot of people associate firewalking with Tony Robbins or T. Harv Eker, right? Because they're the guys in the West that brought it to the forefront. However, firewalking has been around hundreds, probably over 1,000 years, and it's been used by cultures all around the world. And that's in fact, for me, that's where I got into it. I started researching the history of firewalking. So if you look at the Phoenicians, if you look at the Polynesians, the Hawaiians, the Indo-Europeans, for example, the Indo-Europeans back in the day, when their warriors would go to war, right, when a battle would incur, they would all do a firewalk before they went into battle. And if you were a warrior and you didn't do the firewalk, you weren't allowed to go. So you kind of dishonored your tribe. The people of India, oh my gosh, you ought to see them. They over there, it's a rite of passage. It's a ceremonial, very spiritual connection with the fire, the element, and everything that goes with it, right? So, in fact, I got a picture on my website. You'll love it, man. So here's what they do. They dug like a trench, right? And in this trench, it's about, I don't know, maybe about a foot deep, right? And so standing around the trench are all these people and their family and their friends, and they're all the people of India love silk colors, really bright pastels. Are beautiful, beautiful garments, and they wrap up. It's a celebration. And so in the pit, right, is a woman, and she's the same way. She's got all the silk colors, and she looks absolutely stunning. I think she's got something in her mouth, and I think it's a flower to represent something. Mm-hmm. I don't know the backside of that, and I'll find out though. And then she's holding 3 newborns, 3 triplets, and they don't look like they're probably over a week old. And she's in the pit. Now remember, right, IG, we laid coals on grass. You walked on top of them, right? She's in the coals because the coals are probably a couple of inches thick, right? And she's in it, down in the pit. Now she's coming back out. And she's got 3 newborns. She can't get out. You can't jump out, right? Or you drop a child into that pit, they die. So your question, sparked that with me, is that, what's going on? And that's what's going on. We're carrying on a history and a heritage that has been around for, again, I know for a fact, hundreds and hundreds of years. And so that's what it does. People go, why do you firewalk? And I go, because it's going to change your life. Guaranteed. 100%. And if you've got a company and you've got dissension going on, or you've got something's happening, whatever, that's why corporate America hires me like crazy. That they find me and they bring me in to help resolve the issue going on with their people. And especially now, right? Mask wearing, vaccines, boosters, political, everything, all of it was all it did was tear us apart and separate us.
Yeah.
So if you've got a company, right, and that's going on in your company, it's going to affect your bottom line. It's going to affect your profitability, because if you and I are working together as a team and we appreciate each other and we respect each other and work together as a unit, we're going to produce more. It's not rocket science. But if you and I can't stand each other because I'm looking and going, he ain't wearing a mask, or he's not wearing it, or he is, and he didn't get a vaccine, you know what I mean? If all that dissension's going on, that's not good. That's going to cut into your profit. It'll tear your company and your people apart. So Tony, right, he's on the other end of this. He used the firewalk because he knew it would connect them. And that's what he wanted. Number one, break through your fear. Number two, reestablish a belief system that says, if I can firewalk, what else can I do? And then that way on day two, when they come in, they're open to like, all right, Robbins, you rocked our world. What else are you going to teach us? Where are you going to take our lives from here? And so that's really the reason he uses the firewalk and not maybe another type of team building experience, if you will. Because there's lots of other things he could have done. Mm-hmm. However, he knew the firewalk would work.
I want to take a short break from this episode and quickly let you know about something I'm sure you will find useful. We are drowning in information, but starving in wisdom. This podcast, for example, has almost 300 episodes, and as you can imagine, there is ample wisdom in them. But who has the time to listen to 300 podcasts? My mission as a knowledge broker is to convert this vastness of knowledge and distill it into wisdom, into implementable insights. So I have created a free special resource for you. I have chosen the top 10 podcast episodes that offer the greatest value in three main categories of life. First, the top 10 episodes about money. Second, the top 10 episodes about health. And third, the top 10 episodes on mastering your personal development. This free ebook is a curated catalog of those top 10 podcast episodes in each category that will offer you the greatest value and in the shortest time. To get it, go to personaldevelopmentmasterypodcast.com/top10 and you will also find the link in the show notes. Alright, let's get back to the episode. Thank you. There were a couple of words that you used in your answer that they really made an impression. You said something about ceremonial and spiritual as with the fire, that connection with the fire. And I took that very intensely from your answer. So thank you for that. Let me ask you also, even though it's probably, a very broad question, but, having worked with Tony Robbins for all these years, tell me something that you have learned, that you have gained by being in the proximity of this person that maybe you never.
Yeah, I'm laughing because it's like you spend that kind of time with a man for almost 20 years, right? Just a little shy of 2 decades, and you're going to learn some stuff. But yes, there's the first one that comes to mind. I think state management. Okay, let me start with state management.
State management.
It really comes down to managing your state and what you think about and proximity and your friends, right? Another thing. So if we start with state management, managing your state every day. Right. And that can come from consistency and having rituals, and you get up every morning and you do this and then you do that and and then you just create this beautiful life in and around those consistencies. Doesn't mean you're not going to have problems. It just means how I show up to that problem. Right. It's like Tony used to say. He said, listen, we're all going to have problems. But if you maintain a good attitude and you earn money and you do all that, at least you can arrive at your problems in style. Right. And then I think the other part of that is, I learned early on, why don't people get what they want in life? And they don't get what they want in life because there's a story they tell themselves of why they can't have it. So in America, Henry Ford, who developed the automobile, the Ford Motor Company, I love what he said. He said, if you think you can or you think you can't, guess what? You're right. So you got to be very, very careful what you tell yourself every day. Tony also teaches proximity. You are who you spend time with. And he says, love your family, choose your friends. And you better choose wisely because you will become who you spend time with. For me, back in the day when I was, drinking and drugging, I was hanging around pimps and prostitutes and drug dealers and drug addicts and mean, nasty people that, they will hurt you. They will kill you. You can die in the streets out there. And so, but that was my peer group. And then the next thing you know, boom, I'm over here with a bunch of people in AA. So I immediately, because they told me early on, look, you got to change your play places, play things, and play friends. And so again, Tony's, in and around all his teachings. And the other kind of a thing that he kind of taught me that led me to understand that it's kind of a generational thing, right? Cardone talks about this. Gary Vee talks about this. Wayne Dyer talked about this. If you go back in your ancestry, if you go back 12 generations, right? That's 4,094 people that got you to here. Right now, you and I communicating. And those 4,094 people went through all of life. The pain, the suffering, the love. 4,094 people were spread out all over this world. Well, without all 4,094 of them for you and for me, we're not having this conversation. So from my perspective, again, it goes back to what I said earlier. The most important time I was born was it. And then when I figured out why, I remember Tony talking about one time, he said, all humans have two lives, IG. And the second one starts when we realize we have only one. And so for me, that was groundbreaking. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's it. That's it, right? So, I had breakthroughs and epiphanies all along my way, along the career. Tony and I saw some cool and awesome stuff. Like we were in Tampa one time and there was a young man down there, high school student. He got hit by a drunk driver, lost both legs. Next thing I know, he's at a firewalk. He's there. I'm on Tony's lane. I'm shoveling, right? Tony looks at me like, oh my gosh, I think we're going to see something pretty amazing here in a minute. And he looks right. And we're both looking and here comes that kid in that wheelbarrow, in that wheelchair. I'm at my wheelbarrow. And all of a sudden, next, he moves himself. And without any help, he goes into a handstand and he walked across the fire on his hand. And Tony and I looked at each other and tears coming down our face. And, it's moments like that. And that's why that environment is so critical. And like when you and I were talking earlier, I'm like, yeah, immerse yourself in it, man, because you're going to see and be part of things that you're not going to see anywhere else in life, typically. Not. I don't think exactly at that level, you know what I mean, in that environment in 4 days. So, yeah, state management from Tony. Be aware of who you are and what you're doing right now, and focus on all those kinds of things, and also help others. If you help enough people get what they want in life, we always get what we want in life. And then there's one last thing that I think is critical that Tony teaches that he brought to my attention years ago, and that was pay attention to your achievement. Okay. You can achieve at a high level. You can make lots of money. You can buy all the toys. You can have all the stuff. However, if it's not balanced with fulfillment, it's failure. Because in his environment, I met a lot of wealthy people, lots of actors and actresses and professional athletes and Olympians and rock and roll stars and MMA fighters, you name it, across the board, all the athletes out there. And here's the thing. From my perspective, you can achieve at a high level, but if you don't learn to balance fulfillment with it, you're going to get to the end of your life and go, that wasn't the way to do it. Right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. He says success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. That's how I remember him saying it. So thank you for that wonderful reminder. He talks about the science of achievement and the art of fulfillment. So it's beautiful to hear you say these things and bringing it not only to my memory, but they are so important life skills, especially you said the first one you said was state management. How important, the most important. Dave, it's been a fascinating conversation, and I want to ask you just to start wrapping things up. The first thing is, where is the best place for people to find you and connect with you?
Well, sure. Well, thank you for asking for that. for your audience. You can go to firewalkadventures.com. So you just spell out both words, firewalkadventures.com. We're there. Now, the downside to that, and I need to disclose that I sent out a memo at the end of December in 22 to all my clients that this is going to be my last year. I do have an academy, the Dave Albin Firewalk Academy. That's coming in October. So what I'm doing with that is that anybody out there, you're an entrepreneur, you're a business owner, HR department in a large corporation, or you just wanted to come learn all this, right? You can come to my academy. I teach all of it. I teach firewalking, board breaking, brick breaking, arrow break, rebar bending, all the sales, the marketing, the storytelling. I teach it all at the academy, and that'll be coming up the last week of October, and you can find out the information on my website there as well.
That's brilliant. Thank you. And let me ask you a couple of quick fire questions as well. I have two of them, which I always ask. And my first one is,
Sure.
What does personal development mean to you?
Well, it's opened me up to everything. You know, when you go out there and you start studying as many of these, these sages, if you will, these personal development so-called gurus, there's a lot of brilliant information out there. And it's interesting because from my perspective, the first thing I do when I get up in the morning, and I learned this, number one from the military and number two from the personal development industry, first thing I do is make my bed. And I do that because no matter how good or bad my day was, when I come home to a bed that's made, right? And then the second thing I do is I drink water. I live here in the state of North Carolina. I live in the Appalachian Mountains, and I have mountain spring water coming into my cabin. So it's pure, it's alive. I drink water. The third thing I do is I get into my meditation and my sound therapy. The fourth thing I do is I read 10 pages out of a good book every morning. And so that programs your brain. It moves you in you're setting the intention for your day. And so that came to me. So much of what I've learned and what I talk about today, IG, has all come from the personal development industry. So it's made a massive, massive difference in my life and my family's life. Because I don't know if you know this, but my kids traveled with me on the road. When Tony offered me the job of taking over all the firewalks in 2003, he paid to have my kids too. So my kids, my daughter was 6 the first time she firewalked. Davey was 9, and they went on the road with me. So they've been immersed in the personal development industry as well.
One quick hypothetical question as well, Dave. If you could go back in time and meet your 18-year-old self, what's one piece of advice you would give him?
Don't change a thing. Just hang in there, right? Because this too will pass, right? And I learned this in AA. Really
it's
strong,
probably
right?
the most
things
profound
going good,
piece
things
of
are going well, right? Because that's how life is, right? Because I say all the time, look, life's not as bad as it seems. Life's not as good as it seems either. Reality's probably somewhere in the middle. Right. And again, if you're going along and life is really good and things are great and, you're in a new relationship and you bought a new house or whatever and everything's great. Here's what I can tell you. This too will pass. Right. Things are bad. People treating you unfairly. You don't like the way people are talking to you and you're treating you and you're going through a rough time with the people around you. This too will pass. Right. So just hang in there and never give up.
Thank you, Dave. That's as I said, it's one of probably the most profound pieces of advice that this will pass. I want to thank you very much for this amazing conversation. I really enjoyed it, Dave. I will leave it to you for your quick last parting words.
If you want to change your life, change your story. Everything that's ever happened to you, you created a story. Whether it was good or bad or indifferent. I don't care if it was horrendous or it was off the top high. We all create a story about everything that happens to us. So you're the master and you're the creator of your own story. So I would encourage you to create a masterpiece. Don't overtell it. Don't over embellish it. But if you really want to change something in your life, change your story, change your life, my friends.
Thank you for listening, and I hope you got valuable insights from today's episode. For your free ebook with the top 10 podcast episodes that offer the greatest value in 3 main categories of life, go to personaldevelopmentmasterypodcast.com/top10. Until next time, stand out, don't fit in,